Maxine Waters is my co-sponsor on regulation crowdfunding. This very exemption. I've enhanced this. I put additional requirements here to make sure there are more disclosures, and we open up the aperture to $75 million so more folks can participate and so those blockchains can develop. When you make it to $5 million, it makes it impossible for you to actually scale up, especially with these inflationary times that our people are facing. So what I would urge is the House reject this amendment. The gentleman's arguments against this exemption have nothing to do with the exemption, but have everything to do with opposition to the bill. And I urge a no vote, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlewoman from California, Ranking Member Waters.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd like to thank the gentleman from Texas for attempting this amendment. As a matter of fact, there have been any number of members from this side of the aisle who've been attempting to amend this bill to try and make it better. And while I have great respect for all of those attempts, and if they had listened, if they had accepted, perhaps they could have made this a better bill. But at this point in time, no. Unfortunately, with all the work that this gentleman had done, Mr. Casar and others, they will not accept any amendments. They're not going to accept his amendment. They don't think that the bill can be made better. And unfortunately, the bill is so bad, I don't think it can be made better either. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I'm prepared to close, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I'm prepared to close and yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Our securities laws were created after the Great Depression, when this country understood that strong regulation protects Americans and is necessary innovation. We cannot hold cryptocurrency to a lower standard than traditional finance. And my amendment ensures that when it comes to crowdfunding, cryptocurrency is held to the same standard.
I think that goes way too far. What we've done with securities laws is take average, everyday investors and disintermediate them from the greater economy. So average, everyday Americans don't get the benefit of economic growth, of Wall Street doing great, and earnings going up in corporate America. We've separated it because we made it harder for average, everyday folks to invest in companies, have ownership of companies. What we're trying to do is open that up a little bit. From $5 million of an exemption when you're raising money to $75 million. In the scope of our economy, in the scope of our capital markets, in the scope of economic opportunity and innovation, that is a very small aperture we're opening here. And we've done that. We've constructed this provision with a lot of Democrat input and Republican input, and that's how we came to the number of $75 million. It is already a compromise. But what the gentleman offers with this amendment is nothing more than saying, I'm paternalistic, and I'm therefore going to restrict your opportunity to invest your money see fit. Reject the amendment, vote no, and vote yes on final passage for FIT 21. I yield back.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Chairman.
Amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Does the gentleman from Texas rise?
I'd like to request a recorded vote, Mr. Speaker.
Pursuant to Clause 6, Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 2, printed in Part B of House Report 118-516. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Colorado seek recognition?
Thank you. Cryptocurrency. Despite this, the U.S. still lacks a regulatory structure for digital assets, which is hurting American competitiveness and incentivizing some companies, unfortunately, to move overseas. While there may be disagreement about how to best establish the appropriate market regulatory structure, there is broad bipartisan agreement for preventing criminals from using cryptocurrencies for illicit purposes, such as money laundering, terrorist financing, and sanction evasion. My amendment would provide clarity and conformity to how the Bank Secrecy Act and regulations safeguarding our financial system from criminals are applied to digital assets. The base bill already calls for the Bank Secrecy Act to apply to digital assets. By amending the BSA directly and explicitly, expanding the definition of financial institution in the BSA to cover digital asset entities, we are providing certainty to the regulators and the authorities to protect our financial system. Asset market and support regulators' work to protect consumers and investors. While there is more work to be done to ensure the integrity of our digital assets market, this amendment is integrity of our digital assets market. This amendment is an important step forward, and I urge my colleagues to support the adoption of the amendment and the underlying bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
From Colorado Reserves, gentleman.
I ask unanimous
Purpose is
consent to
gentleman
claim the
North
time in
Carolina.
opposition, though I'm not opposed to the amendment. Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to accept this amendment. I think it's important we have a comprehensive regulatory framework for digital asset markets, yes. We also have to ensure that we have a consistent application of the Bank Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering provisions in existing law. Requirements on the digital asset intermediaries and exchanges are necessary so that bad actors don't exploit these markets for nefarious purposes. I want to thank the gentlewoman from Colorado for her work on this amendment. She's been focused on AML, BSA related issues and the build up to us writing FIT 21 during the markup process in the Rules Committee, as well as the process, the process in the Financial Services Committee, then the process through the Rules Committee. And I appreciate her sincere engagement on this matter and for coming up with a very good amendment. I urge support of this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from North Carolina Reserves, gentlelady from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm prepared to close, and I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I want to again thank the chairman from North Carolina for working with me and others to make sure that you were able to bring a bipartisan bill with broad support to the House. I know that this has been years in the making, and congratulations for getting it to this point, and I appreciate your willingness to work with me. I also want to thank my team for helping me address an issue that I have concerns about, and with that, I ask for your support. And is that the last thing?
We need to have vigorous anti-money laundering, Bank Secrecy Act, and know your customer protections around digital finance, just like we do in the analog financial services system. Her bill will strengthen that. I just was reviewing the Treasury Department's 2024 National Security for Combating Terrorists and Other Illicit Financing, and it brings to mind what a better regime it is to have blockchain. Because a blockchain, Mr. Speaker, has the identity connected with the transaction. It leaves an ineligible mark cryptographically of those transactions. It makes illicit finance easier to identify, not less. Treasury points out that the top abusers, the top concern about illicit finance are misuse of cash, including bulk cash, misuse of financial products and services like money orders, easy formation and limited information required to create a legal entity, the use of casinos. That's what the Treasury Department says are the toughest, most challenging aspects of terror finance. And that's why this study will help us make sure that using blockchain is a more effective way to counter illicit finance in the world. So I thank the gentlewoman from Colorado for her support and for being such a constructive source of dynamic support for crafting FIT 21. And I yield back the balance of the time.
North Carolina is recognized.
Again, I want to echo what Congressman Hill just stated for the record. The gentlelady from Colorado has been a sterling advocate for enhanced BSA AML protections and ensuring we get against that we work against illicit finance. And I want to thank her for the efforts, and I'm willing to accept the amendment and urge its adoption. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 118-516. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-516, offered by Mr. Norman of South Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1243, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My amendment is pretty simple. It requires the Treasury Secretary, in consultation with the CFTC and the SEC, to complete a study and submit a report to Congress that identifies any digital asset registrants that are owned by governments of foreign adversaries. The report will determine whether foreign adversary governments are collecting or trading personal data about American citizens in the digital asset markets and evaluate whether foreign adversary governments are misusing or stealing any proprietary intellectual property of digital asset registrants. The GAO is required to complete a study and submit a report to Congress on the very same issues. This amendment would promote transparency regarding how our nation's strategic enemies may be exploiting the digital asset marketplace to invade the privacy of Americans and steal valuable intellectual property. In June of 2023, the financial services hearings that focused on the very bill that we are considering today, Aaron Kaplan, the CEO of Prometheum, the first and only SEC FINRA-approved special purpose broker-dealer for digital assets, stated that Prometheum and its CCP partners entered into a joint agreement in December of 2018 to develop a blockchain trading system where the Chinese partner took a 20% stake in Prometheum. In case anyone has any doubts about the CCP ties, Prometheum's Chinese partner's company was founded in 1969 by a former senior CCP official. In 2021, the party's Central Committee named a National Excellent Communist Party member. In July of 2023, several of my colleagues and I sent a letter to the SEC and the DOJ expressing our concerns with inconsistencies in Prometheum's public filings and the CCP's ownership of an entity that had the blessing of the SEC and FINRA to operate in the United States. I followed up on this letter in September 2023 hearing with the SEC's Gary Gensler, where he dodged my question and did not take my concerns of the 20% CCP ownership of Prometheum seriously. The fact of the matter is that because Chinese companies are genuinely required by Chinese law to share data with the Chinese government, these companies present substantial risk to the United States individual privacy and our national security. Chinese-owned broker-dealers like Prometheum, Webull, and Moomoo operate as registered entities here in the United States, and the Biden administration and Chad Gensler do not seem to care. Yet they attack American businesses operating in good faith with no regulatory clarity. This is simply how the CCP and other foreign adversaries operate. They infiltrate our markets while the Biden administration looks the other way and punishes American companies only trying to operate in the United States but face endless regulations of the Biden administration. We need to pass FIT 21 into law because the SEC's current regulation by enforcement is putting the United States at a disadvantage and allowing foreign adversaries to gain an advantage in our U.S. crypto markets, all the while Gary Gensler attacks American public companies who have tried to work with the SEC and come in and register. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment to protect Americans from having their personal data shared with the CCP and other foreign adversaries. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from South Carolina reserves the balance of time. For purposes, the gentlelady from California seek
To
recognition.
claim time in opposition, although I'm not opposed. While
Please
I do not
recognize.
oppose this amendment, I would like to emphasize that the broad deregulatory nature of the Not Fit for Purpose Act is such that it would severely weaken our capital markets and make us more vulnerable to bad actors, both domestic and foreign. This amendment and the underlying bill do not protect consumers and investors. This amendment only requires a study on whether or not foreign adversaries are operating as digital asset registrants under the bill and collecting data on the U.S. consumer or investors. We should not just be studying this issue. We should be legislating strong data privacy protections that apply all across the board. Moreover, if TikTok was the inspiration for this bill, I would like to note that TikTok is not directly owned by the Chinese government. The concern was that it was vulnerable to being unduly influenced by the Chinese. So if a China-based company was operating as a digital asset registrant under this bill, it would not fall within this study unless it was directly owned by Chinese Communist Party. It would be easy for our adversaries to simply stand up proxy companies that appear to have no direct affiliation with them to evade the scrutiny of the study in the bill. So while I plan to support this amendment, I don't think it provides any meaningful safeguards on consumer privacy, and it certainly does nothing to fix the underlying problems of the Not Fit for Purpose Act. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from California reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Speaker, how much time do I have?
45 seconds.
I yield the balance of the 45 seconds to French Hill.
I thank the gentleman from South Carolina. I rise in support of his amendment. One, that Prometheum, while it was approved as a special purpose broker-dealer for digital, not accomplished anything. It has no business. And yet it also has this partnership with the CCP. So there's an illustration that Fit 20 on how to register a broker-dealer. And secondly, I support fully Mr. Norman.